The sound of rain against the taxi window was a soft percussion to the symphony of my anxiety. I stared at the invitation on my lap, its gold-embossed letters gleaming. The annual Hamilton Philharmonic Gala and Board Meeting. For 10 years, I hadn't set foot in the concert hall my great-grandfather built. For 10 years, my uncle had made it clear I wasn't welcome. Before we go in, I whispered to my phone, recording as I often did for the small community of music students who followed my online tutorials. I want to know who's listening. Where are you joining from tonight? Share your city in the comments. And when this is over, tell me honestly, what would you have done in my position? We read every comment. Now let's begin. The taxi stopped before the majestic neoclassical facade of the Hamilton Concert Hall. Its marble columns glistened in the rain, looking exactly as they had in childhood memories. Grand, imposing, and cold. I paid the driver with the last of my cash and stepped out, my simple black dress immediately dampened by the drizzle. Inside, the lobby was a whirl of silk and diamonds. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible in my department store dress, my violin case feeling heavier than usual against my side. I could hear them before I saw them, the familiar, condescending tones of my uncle, Richard Hamilton. Simply no funding for music programs in schools anymore, he was saying to a cluster of wealthy donors. A tragedy, but we must be practical with the foundation's resources. I stepped into their circle. Uncle Richard. His smile froze. Isabel, what are you doing here? I received an invitation. I held it up. The board meeting is tonight, isn't it? I'm still a Hamilton. I still have voting rights. My cousin Charles appeared at his father's shoulder, his lip curling. Still scraping by giving violin lessons to children, Isabel? How noble. The children are quite talented, I said evenly. More talented than some of the donors' grandchildren you let play with the orchestra for a photo opportunity. A few people nearby stifled laughs. Richard's face tightened. This is neither the time nor the place, he hissed. The gala is about fundraising, not your populist notions about music. Actually, I said, my voice clear and carrying, I'm here to make a proposal about the foundation's direction. Specifically, about the Hamilton Music Academy. Charles laughed outright. The Academy? That crumbling building? We're selling it next month. The developers have made a very generous offer. The words hit me like a physical blow. The Academy was where my mother had taught, where I'd learned to love music. It was the heart of the Hamilton legacy, not this cold, marble tomb. You can't, I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to control it. The Academy provides free music education to hundreds of children who can't afford it. It was grandfather's. Your grandfather is dead, Richard cut in coldly, and his sentimental attachment to that money pit died with him. The Hamilton Foundation needs to evolve. We're building a new wing here instead, the Richard Hamilton wing. He gestured grandly toward the concert hall. A proper legacy. I looked at their faces, my uncle's smug satisfaction, my cousin's contempt. They saw music as decoration, as social currency. They'd never understood it was a language, a heartbeat. You're wrong, I said quietly. But it doesn't matter. I'm calling for a shareholder vote. Tonight. Richard's composure finally cracked. On what grounds? On the grounds that you're violating the Foundation's charter. I unzipped my violin case. Instead of my instrument, I pulled out a thick, leather-bound book. Grandfather's original bylaws. The ones you thought were lost. The crowd around us had grown, sensing drama. I could see board members peering over shoulders. Their curiosity piqued. Article 7, I read, my voice growing stronger. The Hamilton Foundation shall forever maintain and fund the Hamilton Music Academy as its primary charitable mission. Any attempt to sell the Academy or redirect its funding requires a 90% majority vote of all shareholders, not just the board. Richard's face went pale. That clause was amended. By you, I said. But grandfather's original still stands. And I have the paperwork to prove it. I pulled a folded document from the book. His final revision, signed 2 weeks before he died. Witnessed and notarized. The silence in the lobby was profound. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. Charles recovered first. And what? You think you can run the Academy? With what money? Your violin student's pocket change? No, I said, meeting his glare. With this. I turned and walked toward the small stage at the end of the lobby where a string quartet had been playing background music. They stopped as I approached. May I? I asked the cellist. She nodded, curious. I picked up my violin from the case I'd left by the door and stepped onto the stage. I'd like to play something, I announced to the stunned crowd. A piece my mother composed. She called it The Heart of the Academy. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain against the tall windows. Then I began to play. The music started softly, a simple melody that spoke of practice rooms and dusty sunlight, of small fingers learning their first scales. Then it swelled, incorporating themes from the very composers whose portraits hung on these walls, but twisted, made new, made urgent. It was the sound of potential, of talent waiting to be unleashed. It was the sound of everything my uncle wanted to destroy. When the final note faded, the silence was heavier than before. Then, from the back of the crowd came the sound of one person clapping. Then another, and another. An elderly woman pushed her way forward, Madame Petrova, the legendary violinist who had been my mother's teacher. She had tears in her eyes. "That," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "was your mother's music. And you play it with her soul." She turned to Richard. "You would sell the place that creates artists like this? For another wing with your name on it?" The dam broke. Other board members began speaking up. Donors murmured to each other, and I saw the tide turning. The emergency board meeting was called right there in the lobby. I stood before them, no longer the poor relation, but the keeper of a flame they had almost let die. "You have no business experience," Richard spat when we were behind closed doors. "I have a master's in arts administration," I said calmly, "and I've balanced the budget of my own music school for 5 years. We're in the black, something this foundation hasn't been in a decade." I laid out my plans, not just to save the academy, but to transform it. Partnership with the public school system, digital outreach programs, a young composers fund. The vote was called. It wasn't 90%, but it was enough. The academy was saved. Richard was voted out as chairman. The months that followed were the most difficult of my life. My family fought me at every turn, cutting me off financially, spreading rumors that I was incompetent. But I had allies I never knew I had: the music teachers, the parents, the students. We launched a fundraising campaign that went viral. A recording of me playing my mother's composition in the empty academy hall was viewed millions of times. Donations poured in from around the world. The day the renovation was complete, I stood on the steps of the Hamilton Music Academy, no longer crumbling but gleaming with fresh paint and polished brass. Children streamed past me, their laughter echoing in the halls that had been silent for too long. A black car pulled up. Richard and Charles got out. They stood for a moment, looking at the transformed building. "She would have been proud," Richard said quietly. It was the first kind word he'd spoken to me in a decade. I simply nodded. Some apologies come too late to matter. That evening, I taught my first class in the newly restored academy. As I watched my students, rich and poor, black and white and brown, discover the magic of making music together, I finally understood my inheritance. It wasn't the Hamilton name, or the concert hall, or the foundation's millions. It was this: the knowledge that music doesn't care about your pedigree. It only cares about your heart. And mine was finally full.